Hi there. The Church of Nowhere and Truth on False News. I'm kind of inspired to do this little meditation because somebody said to me that it is possible that a lot of the stories about the horrors of what the former Soviet Union did to their ecology, or the ecology of Russia, is exaggerated and even completely and utterly false in a lot of cases. And this brings me up to the sort of consider what is truth, as Pontius Pilate asked, and what is false news, and what is propaganda. And of course, the old adage, history is written by the victors. Uh, Given that, you could get ultra cynical about false news, and even Facebook, wonderful Facebook, has warned us about the dangers of false news. But I think that it doesn't go on to define what fake news could possibly be. And then I saw Donald Trump at a press conference the other day saying that pretty much all the media, all the news outlets are fake news. And in fact, he called a lot of them. Well, he said most journalists are corrupt. Those are his words, corrupt. And not everybody. He said not all journalists are corrupt, but he said the vast majority are corrupt. And as you know, he won't answer questions from some uh, news networks for US television, and they just have to put up with that. But you know, it's gotten so bad, or maybe it was always this bad, but we were all just a bit more naive before the internet, and we all just sort of thought that pretty much everything that we read or listened to on the radio, or watched on the TV, was gospel. And in fact, and of course, as far as environmentalists are concerned, and the sort of radical front, like I was a member of in the 80s, we sort of also took everything that we read on those sort of leaflets that were handed out by Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth to be gospel as well. But they could have been like, but the facts tried to fit the arguments, which is something that people do. And we weren't given just the ordinary facts, but we were given some kind of facts with a hidden agenda to them, just exactly as the propaganda was coming out from the other side. And maybe the first point to make is that when you've got two sides of a story, you've got two stories, haven't you? And and which story do you believe? Um, that depends on the integrity of the person telling the story, I think, actually. And of course, there may not be another story to compete with the one that you're hearing or listening to. So you might not have anything to compare it with anyway. In which case, it's impossible to really say whether something is false news or not. Um, and considering our own perceptions, we might see about as clearly as it's possible to see down to the end of our street, and that might be great. But you see, the thing is, if you live in an ivory tower, if you live in a liberal ivory tower, the argument is that you can see much further than the average Joe in the street who can only see to the end of his or her street, you see, which is why the liberal establishment claims to be so, to be a sort of, well, it wants to be a benign dictatorship ultimately, because it knows more than you or I do about life, and about consequences of actions, and therefore it has a sort of omnipotence, and therefore should be respected, and everything it says should be accepted as gospel truth. So it is very, very difficult, and literally it's come down to the fact that when you're sitting in your meditation, you're nice and comfy and relaxed and not stressed and not, you calmed your mind and your breath, and you're surrounded by nice music and a nice environment, and away from the madding crowds, that kind of thing. Given the right sort of circumstances, you can have what Descartes called clear and distinct ideas about things, and you can sort of meditate on something, and have a feeling about something that you've read, and the feeling is that it is the truth. Like you can't really prove anything exactly, and the text that you've read can't prove anything. But it's not really about proof or disproof. It's about something which just feels good, and feels wholesome and feels like the truth, whatever that's supposed to feel like. And you sort of go beyond philosophical speculation and philosophical argument, to a sort of realm, or maybe a realm of ideas, as Plato would put it, where things feel like they're true. But of course, this isn't enough for most people. Most people have to have proof that something is true. And, the people that argue against Descartes say that clear and distinct ideas, that the phrase is meaningless, in fact, when you think about it for long enough. And it's not enough to say something is a clear and distinct idea in my head. So, what you believe might not be true, to put it in blunt terms. But I think, if you're meditating, you could believe the truth of the peace and silence and quietness that you might experience objectively. So, you go into meditation, and you just, some part of you is aware of how comfortable or how peaceful you are. And some people even say it's possible to ask a question of the silence and the peace and the quiet, and you'll get the voice of the silence answering you, and which sort of brings us into kind of mystical sort of terminology, into mysticism, which the Church of Nowhere might not fully condone, really, because it places such emphasis on moral action, and good works, rather than having faith or the mystical experience. That's not enough. You've got to put your money where your mouth is, and live live an ethical life, and then you sort of you acquire the spiritual authority to talk about things when you yourself are living the dream, or are living the ethical lifestyle that you espouse. You see, which is hard for all of us. But Danny Shine, for example, he has discovered people that have been vegans for 40 years and have never had sugar, never had coffee, never had tea. They don't drink alcohol. He met somebody in London like that, 3 years ago, in Tottenham Court Road, and he the guy was amazing. And I mean, if the guy was telling the truth, which he did seem to be telling the truth, because he was such a matter of fact sort of tone of voice. He didn't seem like he was being facetious at all. So we take it at face value, and there's a person maybe who has the moral stature and the community to actually talk to us about morality, and about religion, perhaps even, or about spiritual things, really, because somebody said to me, it's no good being a professor of moral philosophy unless you yourself are a moral person, and are living the moral life. And I have met some professors of moral philosophy and religious studies who actually are, Buddhists or Jains or whatever, and actually do live a spiritual, ethical life in particular. So I think when we're surrounded, really, as we are, if we're sat here in our little meditation, and we're surrounded by a lot of by a lot of lies, of half truths, statistics which just prove whatever we want them to prove, and quotes from the Bible that justify anything that you want to justify, and we're in our little meditational bubble, bubble, and we can't discern truth from falsehood, really. And maybe, in our meditation, perhaps we shouldn't try to bother. And we just let people, say whatever they like, and people can listen, and people can say they agree with it or don't agree with it. And there's not much that you and I can do about people that tell lies, and that people that tell the truth, really, as they see it. So all we can do is sort of go into ourselves, introspect, and attempt to find some sort of truth about ourselves within the meditation, to sort of to know ourselves, and to know the truth about ourselves, and to look at this truth objectively, and without judgment, but nevertheless to look at it, to look at ourselves under the microscope or under the light of illumination. And then once we've done that, perhaps we can ask a question. Is this person lying to us, or perhaps even is this spirit lying? We might have invoked a spirit or something from the Goetia. We might ask it, are you telling lies or are you telling the truth? And because we're in that sort of spiritual space, the person or the spirit or the community is kind of forced to tell you the truth, because they can't look you in the eye and lie to you. Do you know what I mean? They're just too intimidated by your truth and your beauty, to lie to you, without wincing, without blinking, and without giving themselves away in some form or fashion. And so so it's comforting to know, in fact, that even though we might not ever really know the truth of anything fully, perhaps we can at least tell when somebody is lying to us. And if they're lying to us, then that's a kind of more serious thing than saying how, kind of telling people how you see the world, which isn't exactly a lie. It's just your truth, which may not be the truth, necessarily. But then it comes back to the question, as Pontius Pilate said to Jesus, what is truth? And the Church of Nowhere, really, it would be happy to see a lot more people asking that question,